Welcome back to the Bigwater Podcast. We've been punching these things out every month and kind of thinking about some different stuff, trying to get some different people on there. But the one thing you guys seem to really like is some of the biologist stuff. So we've got actually two guys on from the Ohio DNR, a little different than, you've seen Travis Hartman if you've been around here very long. And we've got some guys actually went out in the boat with them. So we're going to kind of give you a little talking version of some of the stuff that we did in the boat. So without further ado, let's just bring these boys in. We've got Matt Faust and Jim McPhee from the Ohio DNR who have given us our time. One of them gave us an awesome background. The other one looks like he's at biology camp, but it's fine. Anything?
Nothing. Good.
Just
Can't
right out of
see
the
you,
gate.
Ross.
Jimmy, for you guys that are listening to this while on the treadmill, Jimmy is the guy with the very radio deep voice. Jimmy, give us a Blackbeard R, please.
R.
Oh my God, that's so hot. So good. So these guys are they kind of lock them down a little bit. The DNR guys are known as being kind of straight shooters. So we're going to try to pull them out of their comfort zone a little bit. But the primary thing here is we're going to talk about some of the tagging stuff. And I actually rode along with these guys for actually 2 nights or afternoons doing some of that tagging stuff. So Matt, why don't you just give us a little intro and some things here before we just derail this whole train?
Just about what you saw.
Well, I think a lot of people, just backing up. I put a picture up, and again, I think misinformation or people popping off at the mouth all the time is just one of those things, right? And I put a picture up of the net, right? If you guys, when we were in the boat, and immediately, again, 95% of the feedback was awesome. Can't wait to see the video. This is going to be sweet. But you've always got a couple ding dongs that just start running their mouth. It's what they got to do, right? And so when you see that question once or twice, we just we kind of address it, because I think what you guys are doing is amazing. People oftentimes, it's no different than no matter what you do. Maybe it's Michael Jordan or somebody, and they're just like, oh, he's just good, and they don't see all that time in the gym behind. And I look at that as the same way with what you guys are doing. Is it's kind of boring stuff, a lot of it behind the scenes, but it's the stuff that we need to keep a healthy future. And again, we've talked about these things on other podcasts with lampreys and all kinds of different stuff, but there's a lot of just different things that go on. And like the one thing that I saw with a couple of those comments where people are like, I can't believe you're using gill nets on the walleyes. Oh my God. And so give us a little bit of that whole thing on the breakdown of actually the science of even the nets and what we did there.
Sure. So Ross is talking about coming out with Jim and I and some other folks with the U.S. Geological Survey a few weeks ago in the western basin of Lake Erie, and we were going out to try to get our hands on as many walleye as we could to put the acoustic tags in them. We've got a handful of them right here for folks watching. And in order to do that, we use gill nets, which a lot of people associate gill nets with the commercial fishing industry that used to be in Ohio, still is present in Ontario. And we use gill nets every year for fisheries surveys in the fall that Jim and I typically tag team. But in the spring, we're going out and we want to get our hands on these fish as quick as we can and not stress them out, because we're putting 100 tags that cost hundreds of dollars or closer to 1,000 in some cases. And the nets that we're using, we design them, build them so that they're targeting specific sizes. We're not going after huge fish. We're not going after small fish that we don't want to catch, or like catfish, stuff that you don't want to be reeling in on the end of your line, Ross. And we set these nets on the reefs where we know that there's going to be tons of walleye. And I can't remember if you were out with us the day that we let it fish a little bit too long, but we got absolutely slammed maybe the day after you were out. But we're using the right sizes of mesh, so you can think of the mesh as the size of the mesh. No shit. The diameter of the net, and basically the different grade of mesh is going to catch larger or smaller fish, and we're using certain sizes that we know are going to catch spawning walleye, and hopefully we can let the net fish for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and have a manageable number of fish that we bring into the boat to, go off and do our surgeries.
So we're going to have a video coming out here not much after this podcast does, so people can kind of see some of this stuff, because we're going to talk about it, but sometimes seeing is believing. So again, I know you're not a commercial fisherman, and I'm thankful for that, but the mesh size can basically deter larger or smaller fish from getting caught. Is that kind of a simplistic way of saying that?
Well, if you're, think of a really large size mesh, and if you're a 15-inch walleye, you could be small enough that you'd be able to swim through some of the larger, like a 7-inch mesh. And so by setting the sizes of the different meshes within the net, you can target, 15 to 20-inch fish or 20 to 25-inch fish. So,
and the day that we were out, we were specifically trying to target smaller males or small adults.
Yeah, we were looking for just males in general. So if we would have been looking for females, we probably would have used a little bit larger meshes, and we would have been backed off of the reefs where we were fishing. And we were just looking for fish that were basically 17, 18 inches on up, and using like 3.5 to I think 5.5 stretch measure mesh. So that seemed to do the job for us. The 3.5 got maybe more white perch than we wanted, but
that's interesting stuff. And so was that just because of that's, again, when people don't ask enough questions, right? Like you don't get enough of the right answer. So was that just because you guys already had too many tags with different sizes, or we don't want all the fish in a certain year class? Are we trying to make sure that we're kind of diverse in that? Or
so we definitely try and get tags out in a range of sizes. Different sizes, like you just said, will represent different potentially year classes. Larger fish tend to be females. But for this particular project, we wanted to tag a lot of fish, and the tags that we were putting out are getting at the swimming depth of the fish. So the tags not only let us know where the fish are when they're within range of some of the acoustic receivers, but it's transmitting a measure of the pressure that the fish is at, which we can then convert that to a swimming depth in feet. But we just wanted to get our hands on a lot of males, because males during the spawn are very easy to come by relative to the females. And by using that, it sounds like a small range of mesh sizes, but it's pretty wide when you think about what they'll actually catch. And you get a range of sizes in that side. And
so, yeah, we don't want to get too crazy deep in the weeds with some of the stuff. We've had Chris Vandergood on here where we talked about the acoustic telemetry program kind of as a whole, but basically, if you correct me here when wrong, we have acoustic receivers basically placed around, think about them like underground cell phone towers, if you will, that are all over Lake Erie. So no matter if the fish are in 3 feet of water or in the middle of Lake Erie, they're going to be picked up on one of these receivers. So we can say fish 1, 2, 3 is here. And then there's different pressure sensors. So we can say, hey, this fish is probably roughly 15 feet down in the water column right now. But the whole point is we can track these things all over. And that's one of the reasons you want a diverse thing, is because, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves a little bit, but why we're actually doing this, but kind of want to bring Jimmy in here. And, that I learned a lot, or I should say I confirmed a lot, even just a short amount of time with you, when we set the nets, because again, it's like Lake Erie is a great place. We got 100 billion fish, but I can tell you right now, you can go an awful lot of places, and that whole 90-10 rule really comes into play, where you just feel like, you're in the sink, and that's about how many walleyes you could catch is right next to me right here. So when you went out there, obviously you're going to be looking different places for males and females a good portion of the year, depending on where they're at in the spawning cycle. But tell me, without telling us exactly where we were at, kind of what your thought process is, the boat driver extraordinaire there to set those nets.
Sure. First off, it's the timing of the year. We know that in certain locations, there's going to be congregations of fish, whether it's rivers, reefs. So we're utilizing two things to our advantage. One, the congregation of fish, and the other is the cool water temperatures, which kind of alludes back to what Matt was saying about, quick gill net sets, quicker we catch them, the cooler the water, the less stress on the fish, quicker recovery time, and all of that. And for us, when we head out, I'm always looking for, in the spring, the hard substrates, back to the Tyson days of gravel cobble substrate. That's what these fish are seeking out. So we're trying to find those areas. Sometimes we get limited on where we can go or angler pressure. The last thing we want to do is plop down right in the middle of a big pack of boats and act like, we're out there to catch our fish, get out of our way. That's not.
You were super open about that. And I thought that was super cool. However, even though we were in the middle of nowhere by ourselves, you'll see on the video, there was some ding dong that decided he was going to try to fish it like it was a wing dam or something.
Sure. That happens. You can't. Yeah.
But
once we kind of establish a spot, we're going to kind of try to hold on to it as long as it's producing fish. And we try to mark our gear and kind of keep a presence by it so that, back to your 90-10 rule.
Yeah.
We assume someone can figure out what we're doing and we'll stay away from it. But there's always that percentage that's oblivious to it. And even though we were probably only gone from a net for 10 minutes, we come back and there's jigs or lures stuck in it. Like they're attracted to them. They want to go by the net because that's where the fish have to be. They think that we are that good at finding the fish that if the net's there, that has to be where all the fish are. But it's just like going out fishing. We could think we're in the best spot, which we kind of had it that day with you, where I think when Matt was talking about our high catches, I think it was actually like the trip before. So we kind of just went right back to the same spot thinking, water temp hasn't changed that much. Really, the only biggest difference was the water clarity. And I just think we had the right substrate, nice contour. It's always good to cover a couple different depths, just like if you're out fishing, you're going to try to cover the water column until you figure it out. Well, it's the same thing with the depth of water for us, because we're going to fish the bottom up 6 feet. So if we can fish, 15 foot of water and 8 foot of water at the same time and cover that contour and almost think of that as like a wall kind of funneling the fish along there. I always love to look for stuff like that. Good depth changes always help.
We're not like when Jim's talking about trying to figure out, where we're going to hit the fish. We're not out there with one net. And when we're talking about nets, these are like 400 to 600 foot worth of different size meshes. And so we're able to try these different things and eventually one of the nets hits and then we are able to, bombard that area with gear.
It's kind of like try to shit on the wall and seeing what sticks basically.
Well, yeah.
Refocus.
We kind of try to throw the smallest chunk of shit on the wall first.
Yeah.
Because then
just in case there's a lot to clean up.
Yeah.
So,
well, taking your biology and your fisheries stuff off for a minute, because I know you guys fish, putting your fisherman's cap on, the thing that like we in a lot of our videos and just stuff as a guide or tournament fisherman or whatever, just a fisherman in general, that I've learned the hard way, forward facing sonar and all these things that we're learning things because we can see it. And the biggest thing, again, fisheries aside, that I kind of confirmed, because again, it's funny in Ohio now that we can use 3 lines per person. When I'm trolling, I may have 9 lines out. I feel like I'm just, covering the world. Well, when you've got, like you said, 400 or 500, 600 feet of net out that darn near is from top to bottom, you really start to learn like there's no those gill nets have no conscience, as I like to say. Like if it's there, it's going to get it. And do you remember even the day that I was with you, and really say the day, just a couple hours was all it was. And when we made a couple different slides, but on the exact same area, so meaning that we just reset that net, whatever, you guys let them soak, as you say, for 15, 20 minutes for the health of the fish. But as that water was changing, right? So I always tell people, like in the springtime when we're talking about cold water, this is totally different other times of the year. But when I see blue is bad, because it's generally cooler, so they seem to be a highway. Green is good. Brown is usually down, meaning there's a ton of fish, but it's usually that strike zone is so small that, you don't tend to do as well. And so that kind of light brown to green water, and that wind was honking. So, do you remember this? And it was cranking so much that literally there was even a time where I can't remember if it was you, Jim. I think it was. It said, "Oh, this one's probably going to suck," because that clean water had kind of like, you know, you look at the satellite photos, you see these little Hershey swirls of sections, and it blew it clean. I mean, we're talking just in minutes. And when we pulled this net, folks, that's hundreds of feet long, that's literally top to bottom, we had like zero walleyes in it, and we had a bunch of gizzard shad, where literally 15 minutes, 20 minutes before, we had, you know, quite a few walleyes in that exact same net, exact same area. And then inversely, you know, we had the thing where it went back to dirty, and then, you know, we started getting some walleyes or that in between water. Crazy, right?
We ended that day after we had dropped you off, Ross. We were able to move in. Some boats had left an area. We moved into probably the dirtiest water, which then, you know, putting the fisheries hat back on versus the recreational fisherman, the less clarity, the better for the net. I mean, the fish do have an ability to see these nets and avoid them. I mean, you know, walleye don't have the world's greatest reverse. They're not, you know, they're not a bass, but they still see the net, swim around it, make a sharp turn. But, you know, we moved into that dirty water and we were able to get a decent sample. You know, it was kind of that, okay, timing wise, this will be the last run. We got a great sample for the surgery crew, and it was finally getting into that dirty water, and it was there, and the water had been there a while. Yes, the fish moved right along with it, but it was kind of the southern end of the reef that we were targeting, but that had fishermen on it. We were just kind of keeping our distance, and they sort of dispersed, I think, as maybe the dirty water moved further north with the wind, and we moved in there, and bang, there were, you know, went from low numbers to very good numbers for the surgery crew.
Like you said, Ross, nothing kills a bite like a camera. So we got rid of you, and then we found the fish.
Yeah. You've been saving that one. You have been saving that.
Oh, he's got more.
He's got more. Listen, this is Teflon. It doesn't bother me at all. Matter of fact, I love it. But you know that the thing there is again, there's a big difference between dragging a hair jig, right, and having that visibility, because it's pretty much like you said, the fisheries hat and the fishing hat is totally different there with wanting the camouflage. And there is no doubt that in that dirtier water, especially early in the season, like they love that dirty water, but it's like trying to grab a piece of cheesecake in the middle of the night with no lights on. You know, you're just kind of fumbling around there, and that strike zone's so small,
right,
that most of the time that doesn't work so well for fishing anyhow.
But that's the same type of thing that if we were looking to tag more females like we have in past years, we're not going to be right on the reefs, because it seems like they stage a little bit farther off. And whether I'm out there with Vandergoot, you know, 10 years ago when I started, or, you know, last year with Jim, we kind of drive around and you're looking for that dirtier water where it's maybe a little bit warmer, where they're hanging out, and it's that temperature change. And it's also the water clarity where they can't necessarily see the net. And sometimes you get really lucky and you get a net with, you know, 5 to 10 females. And that's a really good haul for, you know, when you're looking for females.
Well, you know, we talked about this with the Vandergoot one a little bit, and I don't remember the exact numbers. Maybe you can get us in the game, but I have a lot of clients, you know, that come in from Minnesota, Wisconsin, and they're like, man, we don't want to troll. We want to like cast hair jigs and, you know, blade baits and stuff. And I'm like, that's fine, no problem, but you're not probably going to catch many fish over 4 pounds because they're males. And, you know, with the Vandergoot, his info, I mean, it wasn't minutes, but it wasn't much more than an hour, I don't think, of the actual time that those females move up, stage, and spawn, and then get the heck out of there. Do you have any kind of numbers on that rough deal or any input?
Yeah, I know what Chris was talking about then. It's easier for me to think about it in terms of time, like in the rivers, where the males, it's the same idea as on the reefs for the males and females doing different things. The males can spawn for weeks, and so they show up early and they stay late. And so, you know, they'll be in the river for, you know, 2 to 4 weeks, if not longer. And the females will be in the river for a couple of days. They come up, they wait for, you know, whatever cue it is. It's a temperature, discharge, maybe it's a photo period type thing. And as soon as they lay their eggs, they're getting out and back into the West Basin or the Central Basin, trying to strap the feed bag on and replenish all that energy that they just lost. So it's days versus weeks for how long the males and females are doing their thing in the spring.
Now, Jimmy, have you noticed, I know, again, we got different mesh size and things as targeting, but when you're in that dirty water, are you catching like some channel cats and some other non-target species that are in? Because that dirty water, I normally just seems like there's everything in it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a better chance of that just because the selectivity of the net goes way down, which it doesn't really have any at any point in time. But the dirtier water, slightly warmer, it's going to have more species in it. It's just, but you could fish all day in the same spot and it's walleye, and then you set a net, you pull it up, and you're like, oh no, the white perch are here. And there's really nothing that changed. It's either some spawning occurred and they were attracted to the eggs being deposited. Just the school came through, I mean, these fish are always moving, they're not anchored to the bottom by any means. So yeah, I mean, the bycatch, I would say, does pick up just because the net itself fishes better. The dirtier the water, the better the net fishes.
I think that people are going to be kind of surprised by the video that we're going to put out here in a little bit, because to me, I'm not surprised anymore because I've been around this stuff enough, but that the average guy doesn't understand how big gizzard shad get on Lake Erie and how many of them there are. I mean, in this video, we had one nets section that, I mean, there was, I don't know if I'd say hundreds, but I bet you it was pushing it where, you guys were working overtime to get those things cleared, because it's no different than fishing. You can't catch when you got something on your line that's not what you want. And, those gizzard shad, get in the 20 some inch range, right? We had them, I would say, in the teens, but there was hundreds of those damn things right in the stretch. Like we kind of just said that, we had walleyes just before and then just after.
Well, that's the thing. We get a lot of overlap with that mesh size, the perfect mesh size for the walleye that we want to get. You're more of a tubular fish for the walleye. You're basically taking a square. That's the perfect size for the walleye. You flatten that out into the shad. It fits in the same size hole. So they get stuck too. There's really I don't know if there's a mesh size big enough, maybe our 7-inch that we fish in the fall, that maybe 95% of the shad can't get caught in it, but
yeah, the ones that do though, holy
shad can get, they're big. they're the 20-inch shad.
Belugas.
Nobody knows that everybody pictures the shad from the walleye stomachs in the fall, the shad that die off in the spring, and think that that's the whole life stage of a shad. There's big fish out there. And I think a lot of people mark a lot of shad on their fish finders and fish all day.
And that's where I was going.
They don't fight because they're.
And if you still are, and you've watched our content, shame on you, because we've gone back through. We've told the tricks on these things. Not that anything's 100%,
right?
But the different ways that you can kind of tell that, because 100%, I 100% know that there are people that are fishing shad and even giant white bass schools at times, and don't realize it until they get some stuff that's sized appropriate. That all of a sudden they start catching 10 at a time. But yeah, these gizzard shad, that's a whole different deal. But have you noticed anything too because again, like with forward facing sonar, I've watched with fish that are in front of my boat that are 10 feet down. As the boat approaches, they go 15, 20, 25 feet down underneath the boat and then come right back up, almost like a kid playing in traffic, going around cars, and they come right back up because, I mean, they're spooked by the boat, even though I got a black bottom boat, we got electric motors, or even sometimes just drifting, that they're aware to us, whether we think they are or not. Have you noticed anything that you're positioning your big boat? Because obviously that just giant beer can of a boat you have. Do you think that anything's changed with that?
Well, there's definitely there's a lot of research out there for that, for vessel avoidance, especially in the hydroacoustic world. Not to totally change gears, but there's a lot of surveys that look at forage abundance, and we do one out of our office and all throughout the Great Lakes. But they've done a lot of like listening comparisons, size of boat, different engines, and just to see that avoidance. So it is a true thing. I mean, you'd be surprised how loud a boat is underwater. I'm sure everybody's been swimming at the beach and had their head underwater. And what's that weird sound? And you look up and there's a boat like 2 miles away, and you're like, that's what I was hearing. But
So do you think
I
it's
know-
hull slap a lot of times, even when they're like drifting?
Oh,
or
I'm
something?
sure. I mean, I think that, yeah, talking. I mean, everything in water just vibrates so much more. I mean, even when you don't think you're probably putting a shadow down there, you're probably putting a shadow down there that, you know, something's different. Something's floating by. It's probably the same inverse effect of, you know, you get dunnage or weeds out in the ocean, and that's where everything's at. Everything hides underneath it. And that when they don't have that, maybe it's like the reverse effect of, you know, something's coming by, let's get out of the way. And then, yeah, they come right back.
This forward-facing sonar, even though that's not what this is about, I mean, we're learning so much because it's kind of like what you guys are doing, but my version, where I'm watching these fish in real time. And when you're casting, if you're not, I would say 50 to 60 foot range is what it is, where they just are like, you'll still catch some fish, but once you get beyond that range, the amount of hookups are 20-fold. They're not, it's almost like their radar is down, like they're comfortable, you know, that they're
Right.
not sensing whatever that is, whether it's comfort level
interesting.
or, yeah. And it's right about between 50 and 60 is that range that I've seen right now.
It could be the pinging of the sonar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very loud too. Underwater.
We've had a lot of guys talking about that are using forward facing, that they're actually, once they kind of locate things, they turn it off.
Turn it away or turn it off.
Yeah, there's guys in tournaments that are shining it on competitors like in ice fishing derbies. we talked about that in another one podcast, just to shut a team down, like hilarious. Well, one guy fishes and one handcuffs the other.
I hadn't heard about that. That's awesome.
That is something that Country Steve would do, and possibly me 1,000%.
That's next level there.
Yeah, that is Goobernation. I love it. But so, you know, the thing that kind of, again, when the people watch this video, that I thought was kind of neat is there was a lot of teamwork going on aside from you guys. Like when I was in the boat with you guys, what you're going to see is, you know, Jimmy's running the boat, and we got a couple of the biologists that are tending, mending, or whatever you want to call it on the lines and setting that, throwing the buoys. And then once we get those, that was just the short term. Like your job is to catch them, keep them in good shape. Right. And then we headed off, if you want to pick that up from there, and, you know, what we did and who we were working with.
Yeah, so a lot of the tagging stuff that we do nowadays is in partnership with the federal fisheries agency, the U.S. Geological Survey. It sounds like they should be studying earthquakes, but they actually study a whole lot about native fish restoration, lake trout, walleye with us, yellow perch with us on Lake Erie. And so the day that we went out, we were the capture crew. So we were out setting and pulling those nets, cutting the fish out as quick as we can to get them back in fresh water, oxygenated water. And then they were anchored, I don't know, a mile or so away from where we were actually doing the catching, or sometimes washing the nets while Ross was on the boat. And they had 2 big holding tanks set up, getting fresh water coming in from the lake. And they were, yeah. And we'd pull up to the side of their boat, which is about the same size as ours, and we'd pass over net loads of fish, 5 to 10 fish, and then they were the actual surgery crew. So they're putting the fish on the surgery board. Fish are getting fresh water put over their gills and zipped open. Tag goes in, stitched up with 2 or 3 stitches, and then usually they recover for 5 minutes or less, and then they're back in the lake, so they can get back to doing their thing where they're nice and happy.
So aside from manpower, because obviously, you know, having people that you don't pick somebody up on the corner that's going to do this stuff and then doing it just like camera people that I work with, right? There's a lot of really good camera guys that can do a football game, but you throw them in a boat and it doesn't work so well. And so, you know, again, cutting a fish open and putting a receiver in is probably not a big deal until you're bouncing around in 3-foot waves in an anchored boat. Like that's a whole different deal there. So aside from helping with some manpower, some of these other agencies that you're working with, is it also some joint funding that kind of helps make this whole thing go around?
Yeah. So we used to do more of a split in terms of like the receiver tending. We would handle a lot of the stuff in the Western Basin, USGS, a lot of like Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, basically every agency around the Great Lakes is now in some way, shape, or form roped into helping to maintain the arrays within both Lake Erie and beyond. And so because we all benefit from these huge arrays, it's really cool to say, I think it was like 3,600 receivers that were deployed at some point last year. That's a really big number and it's impressive. But if it were to just fall on one single agency, we would never be able to do that. And so by, farming it out and everyone has a piece of the pie that they maintain, it makes it all possible. And it's really a cooperative, collaborative effort that it's a lot of fun to go out and work with those folks.
And I don't want to keep saying this and referencing it, but like the Vandergood, where this is all he does. You guys obviously play many roles, and this is just a portion of what you guys do. But go check out that podcast, some of the videos we did where we got really kind of in the nitty gritty of it. But one of the things I learned in that, and tell me if this has changed, is those receivers, generally speaking, their battery life is intended for like roughly 10 years. So
some of the receivers that we put out, those have a battery life of a year and a half. Like if we go out and we really screw up and we miss it or whatever, the receiver will keep listening for the tags for up to a year and a half. And then the tags that we're putting in the fish, you can get those to average out to a 10-year tag. So if I put a tag in a 15-inch walleye and that fish dodges the gill nets in Ontario, it dodges the crankbaits on the end of Ross's lines for the next 10 years, we'd be able to follow that fish over the life of it. We had an example. It's not an acoustic tag, but back before GLaDOS and all these electronic tags, we put jaw tags on walleye. And there was a walleye that was tagged in Michigan waters, like the River Raisin, back in, I think it was 2007. And it was a 17-inch male. Got a jaw tag put on it. And these are like the little metal bands that if you're a waterfowl hunter, sure, you shoot a banded duck or goose, same idea. This fish was caught a few days before Christmas off of Lorraine here in Ohio. And it was 24 inches, something like that. It had grown a bit. But that fish had been out in the lake for 10 plus years. So walleye can live for a long time in Lake Erie, where there's lots of fish harvested every year. And so putting these long-lived tags out there, we get a shitload of data on them.
Well, it's funny. I've talked about this one before. I had one back in the Tyson days, which you guys will appreciate this, with full impression included on this. So I got one of those tags and I hey, am I supposed to throw this back? So I when I know some of you guys, I'll call, and say, hey, and it was a Sunday and he was apparently getting ready to do church or something, but he was like, give me that number one more time. And so you guys can't appreciate this like we can. So he looks it up again, and it was like 30 some days prior, this fish was tagged on Lake Huron, Thunder Bay area, and I caught it around Huron. Like literally, it was like 4 or 5 weeks, later. And if you do kind of do a little map there, that's a long ass ways, right? Mm-hmm. And it's crazy how far these fish will travel. I know we've talked about this on several of the podcasts, that there's muskies and things that are going from, Lake St. Clair to basically Buffalo, New York. And mm-hmm. it's crazy. And then some just stick around one rock pile half the year or most of the year. But what else are we really trying to learn besides stuff that I think is kind of cool is probably not, maybe I'm wrong, the stuff that you guys are really intending on using this information for? Yeah,
it's always fun to see, obviously how far and how fast the fish can swim after you tag them. But this is really providing us with insight into like the consistency of what the fish are doing from year to year. Like those jaw tag fish, we got 2 points of data from that fish that was tagged, between, 15 plus years. And with this, we're getting, hundreds or thousands of hits from each fish each year that it's out there. And by using that, and like earlier in the podcast, we were talking about trying to make sure that we don't tag all, 16 to 18 inch fish. By spreading those tags out across the size of fish that are present in the lake, we get a better understanding of the sort of diversity of, behaviors, migration tactics, whatever you want to talk about, that these fish are doing throughout the year. And by working with the other agencies around the lake, each spawning population. So the reefs are maybe doing one thing, the rivers are doing something a little bit differently. West basin fish, East basin fish, Central basin fish, And by putting all of that data together, we get a much more sort of comprehensive look at the sort of fine scale and broad scale movement that these fish are doing throughout the year, throughout the fish's life.
So I guess kind of backing up a little bit, I guess this is what I assume are common sense, but for us listening here, we got the pros. So we're going to ask them, are we doing it in the spring because obviously shallower water, more concentrated fish, and mortality because of the cooler water? Is that?
That's definitely part of it. In the spring, in the spring, the fish, we talked a little bit about the different spawning populations. So the reefs, Detroit River, Maumee River, Sandusky River, those are the sort of big four that we think about in the Western Basin. In the spring, walleye, just like salmon, tend to go back to where they were spawned from, or like that's what we think. And they do. We call it like site fidelity. So if you have high fidelity, you're going to go back to the reefs year after year after year. And we see that
with salmon.
What's that?
They've proven that with salmon on the West Coast, like going crazy distances to go back to these same little feeder creeks or what have you.
Yep. And so in the spring, when we know that most of the fish are going back to, the areas where they spawned previously, we can get that better understanding of what, maybe the biggest population in the West is doing, where, you can get your hands on fish very easily or relatively easily in the spring, when, you're doing everything that we just talked about, water clarity, temperatures, the right spot, that type of stuff. With the cooler waters, it just makes it that much easier for the fish to recover. We've tagged fish a little bit later into the year, like late May, June, early July, actually going out and working with charter captains. But to do that, like you saw us, Ross, or the folks that watch the video will see us holding the fish for an extended period. Like some of the fish were probably being held for, upwards of an hour or two before they got tagged and released. That doesn't work when the water is warm, when you're trying to release them. It's another thing when you're going to try to, just take them home and fillet them. But when you're putting a $300 tag in them, you want them to survive. And it's the same process, but it's a little bit different. Everything is just a little bit quicker when the water temperatures are warmer.
So on the USGS boat that was actually doing the surgery, as you say, or inserting the tags, I know that they were recording the length. And I was thinking about this when I was watching some of the footage. They were throwing numbers out. Did they weigh those? Because I didn't see them physically hang them and weigh them, or were they taking a guesstimate based on length and girth or something?
I don't think they were weighing them. There are some projects that will take a weight, but if we're tagging walleye, usually getting whether it's a male or a female and then a length on the fish is all we typically do.
Yeah, because I obviously saw you were measuring, but I hadn't seen them weighing. I thought they had some weights or some things they were recording, and I'm like, I missed that part of it. But obviously just seeing the growth as you look at from, if that fish is caught, knowing what it is in 2 years or what have you. But what are some of the other big wins, if you will, that we've seen with the fisheries guys with this program as far as learning or, maybe avoiding of problems?
Avoiding of problems. Well, we know, so we always think about the fish moving within the lake, but then there are always the handful of fish, or we think that the fish might go north, like into southern Lake Huron or up to Saginaw Bay. And we've seen through the telemetry that at least recently, over the last 10 to 15 years, the number of fish that are moving out of Lake Erie, it sounds like a big number, but it's in terms of what do we need to change, how we're managing the fishery. It's actually a fairly small number in terms of the fish that are moving out and probably being harvested by anglers in Saginaw Bay or the commercial nets in southern Lake Huron. And so getting a consistent view into that year after year has been an interesting piece of information that biologists have had on Lake Erie to consider.
What is the guesstimate on the fish, the percentage of fish that are leaving Lake Erie?
It's of the tagged fish, it's less than 1%. So less than 1% of, 75 to 100 million walleye is still a big number. You're talking 500,000 fish or something like that. But, that's not all those fish that leave are going to be harvested. And so when you translate that into actual numbers of fish removed from the population, it's less of a concern.
Well, and I know that there's obviously Lake Erie is, I think, the only one that's completely covered as far as coverage with this acoustic deal. But like we learned through the Vandergoot, again, not to keep beating that one, but that there's fish that are from Saginaw Bay that go to the Maumee River to spawn, which is kind of nuts to me. Like all those places you go through, St. Clair River, St. Clair or Detroit River. I mean, that's a long ass ways to to go for some booty call there, but. I know we don't really have any answers for exactly why that's happening, but it's interesting to now hear that like, hey, these fish are coming from another body of water to here to spawn, but then we also have fish leaving what we consider a really fertile, lake. Maybe it's the food supply because we've got 75 million kids and we used to have 30 million kids and we got the same amount of food. Is that maybe a consideration?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Early on, we were seeing it wasn't very many fish moving north. And those were in the days when, 2013, 2012, 2013, when the walleye population compared to what it is now is much, much lower, but still, a lot of fish. So there weren't as many hungry mouths. And so they didn't have to necessarily swim up to Saginaw Bay or something. And now when there's more fish, there is one of the walleye that I tagged fishing with a charter captain. I got a call from someone who's fishing through the ice in Saginaw Bay a couple of years ago. And it was sort of the same Jeff Tyson reaction, like, say that number again. Where were you fishing? And, that they do this, but it's still really cool to witness that, so to speak.
Again, off topic, but not, these fish, like if you are fishing in Canadian waters of Lake Erie, it's kind of crazy because it's like the stereotype, but often they have that almost black back and golden sides and like white belly strip, where it seems like a lot of our Ohio fish have that, like what you see on Winnipeg, where they call them greenbacks, where they're that very light kind of green, very washed out, very white sides and belly. As these fish move, and you see like Saginaw fish are also really, I would say, different colored a little bit. We're talking maybe splitting hairs at times, but is there something about reacting to their environment, whether it's water clarity or depth, that changes that?
We see every color. When
Yeah.
you put a net out, you tend to see every color, but I always think that when the water's dirty, they just get washed out in general. And then you get in shallower, maybe cleaner water, then that's where they always kind of have that dark look to them where it's like, this must be a northern fish, but we're on the southern shore. So, but we see all colors. I mean, yes, the green is the most common color, but if we get some muddy water, they seem to really wash out and get gray. And then, near shore in the rocks, it's pretty common to see some of the darker, brown and gold colored fish. Yeah.
And that's different than the smallmouth, right? Because like I've caught smallmouth where I hook them and they're out of the water 7,500 feet away and they're pitch black. And when you get them in, they're like super white. That's more of a stress thing, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. I mean, smallmouth seem to be every variation of color out there.
Little wacky.
Yeah.
A little wacky. So what else are some of those things that you guys, when you sit down, because let's be honest, I mean, this is not a business, but it's a business, right? You have funding and things. And so you have to kind of justify some of these things. What are some of the other things that we've learned, or maybe even if it's not necessarily today, but that we're building this data set, right? To, continue to learn. Now you're learning a lot more, I would assume, as you see more correlations on year 10 than you did on year 2 with a bigger, sample size.
Yeah, one of the things that it seems like we're continually working towards building like the computer models to handle the thousands of lines of data, but to try to take advantage of all of the hundreds or thousands of observations for an individual fish. And then you times that by, 3,000 walleye that have been tagged in Lake Erie or something like that. But to try to use the telemetry data to get a better estimate of like the fishery exploitation or natural mortality. So the previous estimates of natural mortality that we have, so the fish that are, going to die of natural causes, whether that's disease or whatever else walleye die of, old age. That all relied on the jaw tag stuff, which was relying on a sport angler or a commercial fisher seeing that tag and calling and reporting it, where now you can get, all of these detections from the fish just out doing their own thing as they're swimming by the acoustic receivers that we have. And when a walleye stops moving, it's dead, or it was caught by someone who missed the tag and it wasn't reported. And so we're working on developing ways to estimate that mortality, which is always really, really hard. When I interviewed for the job that I have now, Jeff Tyson and Chris Vaynergut asked the interviewees how they would estimate natural mortality for walleye. It's not an easy question. And so you have to think about that. And we're building that data set after, a decade plus of tagging these fish, that I think we're getting really close to providing a really useful estimate for that can help sort of adjust our models when we have a new value for natural mortality.
Well, I mean, again, it could be somebody like me that catches one of these fish and lets it go, and maybe the hook's deep or doesn't realize, or they're doing the old gill shot, for a picture and toss it back. Then look, I'm such a conservationist as I bleed him out in my hands. But I mean, is this like a weekend at Bernie's where like, hey, fish 1, 2, 3 hasn't moved in a week? There might be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the cool things when we make the animations of all of these fish swimming around the lake, when you have enough receivers in place, like a lot of the lakes now have, there's going to be those fish that, for whatever reason, if they get caught and thrown back or whatever, they die next to a receiver, and you see all of their buddies pinging all over the lake. And then there's that one jackass that's just on one receiver, and it's just a straight line when you're looking at the plots.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Exactly.
Weekend at Bernie's. Interesting. Any other things on that is I think a lot of this stuff, you're probably going to look back on data, and what's that old saying? You don't know what you don't know, but now maybe it's data from 5 or 10 years ago that you'll be able to use in 5 years from now, right? Is that kind of the hope with some of this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, there's always whenever we start out on these projects, we have the handful of questions that we want to answer with the 200 tags that we put out. But then there's always the gee whiz. Well, I bet we could use these data to look at, for example, how the walleye are interacting with harmful algal blooms, or the areas of low dissolved oxygen in the central basin, or different things like that. And there's an example. I think you said you talked about Lake Winnipeg and the walleye up there. They have a similar grid system up there. And just like Lake Erie, they have a huge hatch of mayflies in the early summer, and they were able to match up where the fish were moving with the big hatch events of the mayflies. So, maybe 5 years from now, we'll be able to do something similar like that. There's lots of different ideas for how we might use these, but I think just as the lake continues to warm, or we have ice-free winters, or maybe the water level drops or something in the next 5-10 years, how does that affect walleye movement? Or, do they do something differently, 5 years from now that they're not doing right now?
Yeah. You're not deleting the info. We're keeping all that stuff handy. And as you get different programs and things, it'll probably be easier to see some correlations and such. But, again, walleyes is my deal. I like smallmouth. I usually call them invasive species and everything. But I think, if people, when they watch the video that's coming out, is we did another day on the Sandusky River. And the big thing is that, this whole program is not just for walleyes. I mean, walleyes are kind of the king of Lake Erie, right? I mean, that's what brings in most of the people and what the majority of the people fish. But we've got a lot of other species. And give us a quick rundown of some of those species that we also have tagged and what we were doing in the Sandusky.
Well, when you were selling me on this podcast, Ross, you said that Hartman, our supervisor, made an appearance and did a silly game where, did you know, Ross? How about you throw out a fish species and I'll tell you if I've tagged it?
Wow. Did you? Yeah. Well, Hartman's, he's like the boss. He's the boss, but he's kind of boring. People, I mean, there are thousands of people literally downloaded stuff. I'm going to say it's because of me, but I mean, he's got a little bit of a following. God knows why. Boring. But Anyway, so we already know walleyes and smallmouth, but do I know anything about muskies?
Yep, we've tagged muskie. We've worked with Michigan DNR to go up and tag them in Lake St. Clair and Detroit River.
Channel cats?
I have not tagged a channel cat. I've tagged flathead, but other folks in the East Basin have tagged channel cats. And it's on my bucket list to tag some of the beast channel cats in Sandusky Bay.
White perch?
Not white perch, not yet.
White bass?
White bass, yep.
Maybe on a video coming out.
Yep.
So what else? The one that kind of surprised me that I think people probably already know, that was some of the carp, because you're using them to basically chase the invasives, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we do a lot of telemetry to inform fisheries management of, the exploited fish like walleye and yellow perch, but you can also use telemetry for invasive species management or removal control efforts. And so Ross was talking about grass carp, which are a species of invasive carps. If you've seen the videos of the big jumping ones like that, but grass carp have been in Lake Erie for 40 years or so, and starting to see and catch more and more of them over the last 10, 15 years. And because they're low in numbers, they are a pain in the ass to catch. And so trying to do different things to understand where and when they're moving, so that the removal crews that are out there chasing them basically every day during the summer and fall, how can they spend their time more wisely? And telemetry isn't the only piece of information that they're using to decide where they're going, but it's provided some useful help in guiding that.
So be honest, did you watch the Hartman or listen to the Hartman podcast?
No.
I didn't know. I mean, you guys obviously need help catching fish, but I just wondered, and besides using, not all of us can use a 600-foot gill net, but I just wondered if you were going to size up the competition. I mean, you guys are a little competitive. I mean, it wouldn't be much of a competition if we were fishing against each other and you didn't use your gill net, but
yeah,
that's a shot directly at Jim, because I know Jim's got the ego with that. I know it.
Yeah. I don't need a net.
I know it. Come on, give me an R. Give me one more.
I don't need a damn net.
I might need a net.
I try to see how fast I can
Any rate,
a net to land my fish. They come so quick.
Do you have like a 20-foot net like Ross probably has, Jim?
Yeah, quick, net it before the fish actually fights. I've seen these trollers.
It's all about getting her done, Jim. We got to get her done.
Yeah.
We're kissing babies and taking
bank.
pictures over here.
We'll get the next group.
Well, we don't do exactly that, but I've seen some heartbreak. I totally digressing, but I think my people appreciate this. I have saved a couple of relationships where the husband looks at me, and I use a Beckman net. I've been using the same ones for 25 years, literally the same ones. They've had 20 bags on them, and there's always this. It's just a man deal, right? But again, I've seen some pretty big dudes. Guys got biceps the size of my thighs, and they're like, "Hey, Captain, let me net this one for my little lady." And they get that 9-foot net, and they realize that now they're pole vaulting is what they're doing. They put the thing in the water. You got movement, you got current. And I have literally grabbed another net and went over the top of them. One of them, I got a GoPro video. One of our guys out in Nebraska that fishes with our guide service. And literally his wife turned and looked at him. She's like, "Oh my God, thank God, he sucks at netting so bad." And I just looked at the guy, and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, saving your relationship, dude. That was the 30-incher we got. And we're getting a picture. But guys are bad netting. We're actually putting a video out on netting just because it's so comical almost, the last sale. But anyway, getting back to the topic at hand. So we went in the Sandusky River. And that deal was basically, we were primarily doing white bass was the kind of the intention, right? Because again, give me a little bit of a simplistic breakdown of why not just walleyes is important, why we need to know these other things.
Yeah. So in the case of the white bass, this was another project that's being led by the U.S. Geological Survey, and they're taking the lead on a lot of the telemetry and other avenues of research related to grass carp removals and things like that. And one thing that's been proposed to try and limit access of grass carp to good quality spawning habitat is to put some sort of non-physical barrier. So playing different sounds, bubbles, strobe lights, things like that, that will basically deter the grass carp from moving up during their spawning window. And obviously that's going to potentially impact other native fish like walleye or white bass. And so we've gone out over the last 3 years or so to tag white bass, buffalo, suckers, a handful of bowfin, you name it. If it's a native fish, channel cats as well in the Sandusky River, and then looking at how they're using the area around where this barrier is potentially going to go, to get our heads around, what is natural movement for a white bass look like, because everyone can say what a walleye probably does in Lake Erie, but it's a little more challenging to say, like, what does a male or a female white bass do? Do they hang out in the river? Do they hang out in the bay? Do they swim to New York and back?
So have you guys tried just playing some Nickelback to see if that deters them?
It made them come up.
Right? I mean, that deters a lot of people, right? Shameless. So the I say evening, but really the night that we went out just before dark, again, assuming people haven't watched this video yet or explaining a little more detail, is the intention was to chase these fish. And people that are from not around here, there's a lot of people listening to this that have no idea what the Sandusky River is or what it is. We were in a little jet boat. And that, generally speaking, the sections that we are in there towards downtown Fremont are, generally speaking, waist or shallower, right? Matter of fact, you had to jump out there a couple times, and we got to see that. And we were explaining the whole electrofishing better than I can. So we were not using a gill net. Gill net in the river would probably not be good. So
no, not in the Sandusky. Yeah, we're using one of our electrofishing boats. We have a small generator on the boat to produce the juice, and then we have booms that go out into the water and put the electrical field out there. We measure the water conductivity to make sure that the power going into the water isn't gonna kill the fish, because we don't want to harm the fish that we're shocking.
And so, stopping there for a second, what he's talking about is he had a little probe. It looked like your little kitchen deal checking your meat temperature, and you put that in the water, and then you had a little cheat sheet that allowed you to dial your box up there, so we didn't put too much juice in. And like you said, don't put your hands in the water because it can knock you out.
Yep. Yeah. And so then, we're driving around after dark, because it was before anglers could fish after dark for white bass. And we're trying to get way up there as shallow as we could. We're trying to look for the white bass, but we were seeing all sorts of different stuff. It was kind of at the tail end of the walleye run. I think we saw a couple of walleye, but
we had a few that we put in the temporary tank there.
Yep. But yeah, same.
If people think that a gill net doesn't have a conscience, they should see this electrofishing deal, because we had, just literally at points, hundreds of fish coming up, and you think about, how shallow water we were in and really how narrow that river is. We saw carp, walleye, there's a couple different buffalo,
catfish, suckers, gar,
all them trash fish, as I like to say, but
no such thing as a trash fish, Ross.
I know. Jim, I saw your all God's creatures look, and I'm just whatever.
It wasn't that look. It was just no trash fish.
We don't use it. We're not allowed to use the word Asian carp anymore. I'm allowed to say it. You're not. All right. Yep. Whatever. Any rate. See, I love what you're having the I understand the cross that you bear, the burden that you were dealt with, and we appreciate your service for that. You're like a like a cop, you have to play both sides all nice and fair. I, however, do not. So it's kind of like cheating a little bit, but so any rate to kind of just playing through the video in your mind, as you could kind of see, even though you haven't seen it yet either, Matt, is, we're up in there, we're just netting these fish, putting them in the temporary holding tank. So it's very similar. We're just obviously, shocking them up essentially instead of using that gill net.
Yep.
And then throughout the season, would you have done that earlier in the season, or did you, to get some walleyes?
Yep. Yeah, we definitely did. but it's the same process that I described as being out on the lake with the nets. We were the capture crew that night, going out getting whatever fish we're after, whether it's walleye or white bass. And then there was a crew back on shore that were responsible for tagging and all of that stuff. And so I think eventually we brought you back and got to see some of the bass that we caught being tagged. But yeah, we did the same thing on the Sandusky River for walleye. I think it didn't work out. We invited you out, but I think you were out fishing. We were doing a lot of stuff during the day for the walleye work. And so same process, except I was the surgeon for that. And Jim, I think in most cases, was leading the capture efforts for the walleye.
Yep.
So the $1 million question that I feel like somebody that maybe isn't even into fishing that they would ask right now is, what is the biggest or biggest, two questions, the biggest but also most unsuspected catch that you've had, whether it's shocked up or netted? And I have this is a little bit of a loaded question when I tell you the punchline here, but
there's been,
I mean, well, we've had what was the Maumee walleye, almost 15 pounds.
Yeah, it was pretty big. Brian, the other biologist who's out on the boat with us that night, I think he's got his goofy face holding that walleye up. That was what, 3 or 4 years ago that we caught that.
Yeah, probably 4 years ago. Obviously, the one spring, Matt and I just tried to go out and get a few walleye for the creel sample and turn the juice on, and up popped a close to 4 foot grass carp that we were
not expecting.
Kind of in the infancies of the whole grass carp project, and kind of looked at each other like, okay,
what do we do with this?
What do you do with this thing?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, the unsuspected or the sturgeon, the muskie.
People always, there's something about that. I don't know if it's because it's like dinosaur or prehistoric looking or age that I get asked all the time. If you go to sturgeon, like I could catch a 20-pound walleye, and to some of the tourists, they're like, oh, but you haven't caught a sturgeon out here? Well, next. Yeah,
charismatic megafauna. The bigger they are.
Yeah. There are people in the Detroit River now that are actually running guide trips for those. Yeah. A little different deal.
I set line to Detroit for multiple years. I've had them up close to 7 foot. Right.
Yeah. I went out on a charter a few falls ago. We didn't land any. Eric Whita, you failed to land it. Hopefully he listens to this, but yeah.
You guys, I was going to bring up when you talked about Brian. I mean, because I can't believe you guys have been so nice to me so far with all the, the trash that we've talked behind the scenes. But Jim, I thought you were just a pretty face or pretty ugly, one of the two. But the boat driver deal. So what else are you doing besides? Because we learned really quick that we needed to use the boat driver when Brian took over, and we almost had to get a new boat, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Everyone has to learn. Everyone has to learn, just not usually with me on the boat.
Yeah, you just happened to be there the day that we were like, oh, maybe you could get some wheel time, and figured out that was not good with someone with a camera.
Yeah, you were not quick to turn the wheel off either. I could see you're like that guy driving. It's like, I'll drive the whole thing to Florida. It was like National Lampoon's, I'm driving or we're dying.
We're only stopping for fuel. No, you got to learn at some point in time. I mean, it didn't pan out for him that day. It's fine.
It was windy.
It was windy. Pulling up to another boat, pulling up to an anchored boat in any kind of weather. I mean, not that it was like really rough or anything, but that cushion that you get between the boats, they do not want to go next to each other. I can't remember if that was the day they had it tied up where we were going. We were like,
they had one anchor down, and then they were putting another anchor down because that was it was swinging so much for both them and for us trying to get in there.
I could do it 10 times and it might only look like I did it right twice, but we're going to get up there without hurting anybody or damaging any property. But if you don't do it all the time, it's hard to do.
Especially when, somebody's going to jump out of the boat. I'm sure we're probably going to say that out loud.
That was nimble. I mean, we were just like, okay, see you. and then
Well, I did it very quick, mainly because I thought that there was a chance that somebody there was going to be like, you can't do that, if I'm being honest.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
insurance. I mean, I know how this world works. You guys,
I would say we were just excited when you got off our boat, and then just figured you were going to come back the same way.
Hey, I can tell you the other boat was excited to get rid of me too for a different reason.
Yeah, I'll keep out of that one, but yeah.
I mean, it's fair game. I mean,
okay, Captain Poopy Pants, you brought it up.
You brought it up.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you can't have fun with this stuff, I mean, I'm going to throw it, and sling it so I can't. But what they're talking about is, let's just say I've got over 5,000 days on Erie in a boat. And I've only had 2 times that I've had to, let's just say, emergency evacuation of the drawers. And one of them was with these boys, and it was bad.
Yeah.
I ate it because I had been on the water, I think something like, even before I got to you guys, like 10 hours, because I had a couple back-to-backs because of the weather that was coming in, which is why we pushed this to get in. And anyway, and I ate this sausage if you remember, Matt, while I was talking to you, like summer sausage and cheese, while we were talking on the back of the boat moving. And it was about 5 minutes later that I was like, that was not a good situation. And we are going to have a situation, which, by the way, I'm not the watercraft police here. However, you did not have readily available a bailing device, because I would have used it then, since I would much rather poop in front of you guys, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, we hide our poop bucket.
Yeah, I permanently mortified that young girl that was on there, the intern. She was just mortified.
Ross, did you know that you were on camera doing that? There was a 360
on the 360 camera. Yeah, it's already been brought to the attention of other people that thought they would use it as blackmail, but then they're like, Ross would shit on camera just to do it. And so they're like, this isn't as much fun anymore. And so it's like, it just doesn't work.
Not necessarily getting the original footage of something like that, huh?
Yeah. It's, you got to do what you got to do. But it was funny because it was like, hey, that bucket you're using for the walleye, since you have no other one, yeah, I'm going to need that. And it was only about a 13-second process from start to finish because of the
sausage.
Did you get the bill from USGS about for the 5 new buckets that they had to buy because they just threw them all out?
They were not able to tell which one it was when they returned to port and said we must throw them all out.
Well, they only had this. That's like, I'm you government guys, I'm buying these things for you quite literally. I mean, maybe my boys get all this excise tax and all this stuff, right? I'm like, could you think you guys could have it 1 extra bucket or something? I mean, I'm not trying to get particular up in your shit, but I mean, really? Pun intended. We had to end this on some poop. You know that, right?
If you were in our big boat, we would have had a nice poop bucket for you.
Yeah.
And a bag, easier clean up.
Yeah.
It would have been more fun to shit in front of you guys, honestly, because they were so petrified on my behalf. Because they didn't know me, that I'm just like, I have no feelers, and just like, boom, done. They're all huddled in there like they were hostages in the cabin. It was great. You guys can watch the video. Chris has got the video.
I'm good.
Fun fact, to just take this to one more step of just nastiness. So when you have an emergency poop, folks, right? And you're just like, this is not good. And then you're like, of course, now we don't have anything. And instead of ripping the sleeves off, this nice young lady, I probably shouldn't go there, was nice enough to hand me a feminine hygiene product that we... Yeah, we're going there. So just so you guys know, on my boat, I have toilet paper. I do video you if you have to do it. We did that once this year already, and we're not even a third of the way through the season. So, Jim, just think about that. And I didn't know if you weren't bringing this up because I fixed your boat and we didn't have to come take you off golf night when we were in the river. Now we were dead in the water, folks.
We didn't fix the boat. I took it to the ramp and it just fired right up. So
the tanks messed up. It just depressurized. But fisheries biologists aren't MacGyver. I'm going to tell you that. So we got it all going again.
I've found out over 20 years of doing this that I can't be there all the time.
Yeah, you were you were at golf league or some BS, and Matt was like, he was petrified to have to call you, but we're literally floating in a river, and he's out with waiters, and I'm filming him. And you want to talk about that?
China buffet.
You thought there was rocks in the drive, or
No, I've seen this move by Matt before. He wants to get off the river so he can make the dinner special at the China buffet.
Yep.
well, that would have caused 2 poops in 2 boat rides right there.
He likes to fake an injury every once in a while.
Well, I could see that, but not when we were at the wrong area. We were
Right.
way far away from, like, you're gonna do that right near the ramp. You're like, oh, doesn't start, gotta go home.
It takes a pro to have the right spatial awareness.
So we've learned that I have no problem pooping in a boat. We've learned that you can electroshock these fish to get the acoustic tags in there. You can also use a gill net, and it's not deadly if you do it right. And obviously, anytime you touch a fish, it can be bad. But is there anything else that these people should know? Because on a serious note, what you guys are doing is a great deal. And for people to start throwing mud and different things about, oh, you're doing it, shut up. These guys have been doing this a long time. Not that the system isn't being refined as technology and time, help with that stuff, but they're doing this for us so that we can see how many fish we got. We can adjust these limits properly. Where are these fish at? And ultimately, all of this information is public, you guys. So you can go look this up, whether it's on GLaDOS, which is that actual site that has all the little trackers and stuff on it. And there's a ton of information on there. The DNR also has a lot of information that's all public. So this can actually help you catch a lot of fish. In many cases, I would say, just like satellite imagery, which is a government deal and free, helps us catch a lot of fish. So does this. So is there anything else, Matt, that you'd like to throw in there besides you're going to put toilet paper on the boats moving forward?
Only when you're on the boat, Ross.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it can't be the first poop on a boat. I mean, come on.
It's always on the big
on
boat.
the big boat. When it's a 3.5 hour steam after a 14-hour day back, biology.
You just gave me an amazing. I wonder if we can pirate off to ask producer dude if we can pirate some stuff, because I could just see us playing the Gilligan as that boat comes in, the Gilligan soundtrack, like the no words, just the soundtrack. So because we have zero budget. We're not like you government guys. We have zero budget right now.
Yeah.
Would you like either
cars if anybody's giving them away?
Captain Jim or Matt, would you like to leave us with any information, rather it's just randomness, or about the program itself?
Well, I was just going to touch on
you guys stall.
Right, but I was going to touch on letting people know that everything we're doing it in the the most efficient way we can think of, the most ethical way we can think of. And I mean, it truly is. I mean, we are doing it for the sportsmen, and women. This is, we don't just go out to do this to have names on papers or anything like that. I mean, the entire reason that you work, especially in, an assessment agency like we do, that's to keep the resource there for the people moving into the future. And, it is upsetting. I guess it's just the world we live in, where everybody's got a big opinion, and people, we're doing it wrong. And that's never our intention. I mean, you sometimes have to fail to learn, but we're always trying to find the best method, the most ethical method, and do the best science that we can to give the best product to the people. And I think, Lake Erie, it's kind of self-sustaining because it's such a, productive lake, but it does take the proper management to not waste what you have.
It is till it isn't. Other lakes, Kentucky Lake, there's a lot of case studies of places that were really amazing that really took a shit. But and then when it happens, it happens fast. And I think that's what you guys have, a proactive approach to at least seeing these things and figuring it out.
Yeah, we have our finger on it. The walleye population, sure, it's high right now, and you wouldn't think you could mess it up. But just what you're saying, if we don't have that trend data and all that information compiled together to see it change before it changes, then we can't react. So,
well, even though you didn't have toilet paper for me, I still appreciate. We're going to call you Captain Jim McPhee and Matt Faust with the Ohio Division of whatever Fisheries. Wildlife. Yeah. I mean,
Jim's got it on his background, Ross. I've got it on my shirt.
Which way is that?
Yeah, that background is so. Are you at like Bob's Bingo, or where are you really even at, Jim?
I'm
Seriously.
sitting by the pool in Florida.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
What captains
Well,
do.
regardless, I appreciate you giving your time. I know you guys did some after hours to accommodate our fishing schedule here, so I appreciate that, and also what you guys are doing on a daily basis, and I hope everybody listening to this also does. Make sure you tune in to the next Bigwater podcast, as well as the videos here. We're going to have one our day or evenings on the water with these guys as well. That's kind of a really interesting thing. At least it was interesting to me, and I think it will be to you guys too. So make sure you tune in. Check us out at bigwaterfishing.com, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all that good stuff. Just look up Bigwater Fishing. We are there. Until the next episode, stay tuned.